Welcome to the Podcast Editors Mastermind Show. I am your host, Steve Stewart, along with my co-host, Mark Deal, and we've got a special guest on today. His name is Paul Gowder. Paul Gowder has been the driving force behind powwows.com for 25 years. Is that right? 25 years?
More, but yeah.
I mean, did the internet exist that long ago?
It was very early, but yes, it was.
Wow. And from what I understand, Powwows is the largest online community celebrating Native American culture, arts, and traditions. And you've been connecting millions of people with the beauty and spirit of powwows for 25 years. That's super impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you guys inviting me on. I'm looking forward to talking today.
Yeah. So you have, you did a session at Podfest talking about podcast to inbox, which a lot of people are like, what? Podcast to inbox, what does that mean? How to get listeners to become email subscribers. I know the importance of email subscribers, but maybe the people who are listening or watching this don't. Can you kind of tell us what is the importance of having an email list?
With social media right now, things are changing so quick, and Google, the algorithm updates. There's only two things in all of this marketing world that you can own and you control yourself. One is your email list. The other is your RSS feed for your podcast, right? Those are two pieces of content you control completely. And with all these kind of changes and unknowns, I think you really need to invest in growing both of those. A quick story is, and why this is important. I made the mistake of not having an email list for a certain topic. I've been doing a podcast on powwows.com for years, and it was really, really exciting when Facebook came out with the ability to have your podcast on Facebook. And we have a great following on Facebook. Right now, we're over 1 million followers. I think at the time we were probably at 600,000 or 700,000. And podcasting for me back then was easy. I would post an episode, Facebook would share it, and I'd get 15,000 downloads. It was, it was easy. And then they did away with having a a podcast integration, and all of those downloads disappeared overnight. Gone. Could be because none of them converted over to subscribing to the Spotify or the RSS feed. So all of those listeners were gone, and I did not do a good job of capturing those. Toward the end when we knew podcasting was kind of ending, I tried to have some call to actions, but I wish I would have worked harder in my podcast earlier on to have them convert over to email so that I could actually control that audience better.
Those are some impressive numbers.
Thank you.
Definitely impressive numbers, and that's on a huge scale. So I imagine that's a big gut punch. But even on a smaller scale, Steve, you and I, a podcast editor club, 9,300 professional podcast producers, editors, managers, directors in that club. So a little less than 10,000. But we've kind of gone through some of the same things with some of the changes with Facebook. For example, we used to do live streams where we could live stream directly into a group, and Facebook has gotten rid of some of that, as well as Facebook is now saying, hey, they're going to delete all your old live streams. But luckily, we've been focusing on, as you were saying, Paul, a place to own. So we've always from day one taken those videos and put them somewhere else that we own, so they're right. Safe, as well as getting the word out, because then we can't really live stream to Facebook groups. Then how do we let people know that we're going live on this other channel, if it's a YouTube or wherever it may be in the future? Yeah, having that email list is always nice, because you can tell people, hey, we're going live tomorrow. We're going live in an hour. We're live now.
Yes. The same thing. I just last November, I had a Facebook group. We had 85,000 members, and Facebook deleted the whole group.
Oh.
Those kind of things happen, right? And you don't know. I think it is. You have to build your email list. You have to do that. You have to own it. Before you even, I think it's important to grow Facebook groups, and I have some friends working on Substack and all these other platforms. All great. Build your YouTube channel. I just got my plaque a few weeks ago. Build your YouTube channel. Build all that stuff. But email should be the first step, I think, in building a business.
Right. And do we even have to mention TikTok closing down in January? I mean, that scare there, they lost a complete platform, not just, a channel or a Facebook page.
And we still don't know what's going to happen with TikTok.
Right. So you're saying you have to have an email newsletter or an email list. I mean, is there a difference between an email list and an email newsletter? Let's start there.
So the email, for me, I think grow your list first. I tell people that, if I'm coaching them or whatever, don't worry about what you're going to send on your weekly basis. Forget about that, because people get so overwhelmed with, oh my God, what am I going to put out every week? I've got to talk to these people every week. Don't worry about that. Let's build your list. Let's just think about when somebody comes on your list. Let's create maybe a 2 or 3 email welcome. Hey, here's who I am. Here's what I do. Here's what my business is about. Here's how I can help you. Build that. That's your elevator pitch, right? We can create a 2 or 3 email series that just says who we are, our elevator pitch, and then just work on getting people onto that list. We can figure out what to say and do all the other things with email. We can make email really complicated, right? But let's just do that first. Let's build your list and just welcome people to it, and then grow from there.
I like that because, Steve, what I'm hearing is really a couple pieces of content or a couple silos of content to answer your question, Steve, of, list versus newsletter. We're definitely talking about a list. And then what you do with that, to Paul's point, sure, there's a newsletter, and the newsletter is typically time sensitive or built around the time of the person writing it, whether it's you or I, Steve, or what's going on in the industry. Something happens in the industry, you let people know that news via a letter in their email, right? Sure. But then there's that other piece, that other silo that's very important to point out, and thank you for that, Paul, is the timing of the subscriber. When someone signs up to your list, they are showing, hey, today at this time, on this day, I am showing interest in you, in what you do. And for that, here's my name. Here's my email. And you return to them the welcome sequence, 2 emails, 3 emails. It basically says, hey, you're new here. I acknowledge you're new. I've been doing this, email, whatever, 2-3 years. They don't care about that. They care about themselves. So you're welcoming them in, letting them know, hey, what to expect. And maybe another follow-up, but it's more around them signing up versus it sounds like what you're saying, Paul, not having that welcome sequence to where you just have a newsletter, someone signs up, and then the first thing they hear from you is either the next day, 2 days later, a week later, 2 weeks later. It's some random news or something that's built around my schedule, not so much them. And you really haven't really warmed them up as an email subscriber.
Yes. Welcome sequences to me are more important than building out your weekly newsletter. I think you need to deliver that first email instantly, and it needs to be that your first contact, your first touch. And if you had an email opt-in that said, hey, I'm going to send you X, you deliver on that promise, you tell them how you're going to help them, and then who you are. I don't think that, people want to be the next morning brew or something on the first day of email. And let's not worry about that. Let's just get a simple thing going and grow it. And then, down the road, we can figure out what else to do with your email and how we can utilize it and grow your podcast or grow your revenue. But first you got to just get that list going.
Right. And that's a good thing for us as podcast editors, managers, producers, directors, when working with our clients to say, do you have an email list? Do you want to grow your email list? And I'm sure we'll talk more about some of the use cases and why to do that and converting listeners from the podcast over to email subscribers, which is great because that shows obviously, right, increased value for us, right?
Right.
We're helping you build that list, but also giving them a little bit of the knowledge of there's a couple ways you can go about it. The newsletter, the welcome sequence, there could be a sales sequence or a launch sequence if you're selling something you have or launching something new, those sorts of things. But at least letting your clients know that you're a podcasting professional, you focus on the production and the excellence of your audio forward content, but also you can use that to grow the email list, but also letting them know that, hey, you understand that there's these multiple silos and you're here to help out, whether it's maybe not write the whole thing if you're not, background's not in copywriting, but at least being aware. So that way the calls to action and everything in it. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and step 2, before we even worry about a weekly newsletter, if you're a podcaster and you've got more than 10 episodes in the can, then, and I do this on powells.com with old blog content or articles, is every Thursday I built a sequence, and we build a new one every year, for that year, and it's our Throwback Thursday sequence. So every Thursday, my audience gets an email. They think it's a broadcast message, but it's a sequence. It's an automated thing. And every week it says, by the way, you may have missed this article. This is something we wrote. I think you're going to like it because of this and this. And it's a link. that for a podcaster, create a podcast roundup sequence or whatever. That, hey, here's an episode you may have missed. I interviewed this guest. I think you're going to get this and this out of it. Go click here, and you just build that ahead of time. And there you go. There's your second thing you send out to people, and that it's done. It's automated. You spend a few hours building it out at the beginning of the year or whenever, and you're done. And now you've got another piece of content that's going out to your email subscribers and getting those downloads going.
That's awesome. Steve, imagine that. Imagine you've been a podcast editor for this client for many years. You've got many, many, many episodes, lots of episodes in the backlog, but the focus is always on, what's the next one released.
Right.
But you as a podcast editor or manager can say, hey, here's your backlog. In fact, now that there's AI tools, it can basically write a recap and frame it as an email or an email update. And to use Paul's idea, let people know in the newsletter, like, hey, we covered this topic, 2 years, 3 years ago, whatever. I had this discussion with this great guest about this. It's still relevant today. It's worthwhile checking out. So that work, Steve, that you did in the past is now providing more value for your clients, or continued value, which shows continued value for you as the podcast editor.
Yeah, that sounds like a great service that podcast editors, podcast managers, podcast producers can offer to a podcaster of, any experience level. If they've got 2 episodes, or obviously if they hadn't done a newsletter type of blast for years, but they've got all this content, there's a lot to draw on there. There could be some themes, every holiday season, come back with a Christmas story, whatever. Or, it sounds like something that I think podcasters don't realize the importance of 2 things: blog posts and newsletters or email lists. I think they all talk about the RSS feed and getting listeners and downloads, but organic search through Google or contacting them through this intimate medium, which is email, is a great way to connect directly with the listener, even if they never reach out to the podcaster. So those services are desperately needed inside of this space. Mm-hmm. I think podcast editors can step into that role and become managers and producers to do that type of thing.
Definitely. And we don't have to manage the newsletter themselves. We don't have to manage the newsletters themselves. We can just give them that snippet and say, hey, run with it. It's like podcasters that have a guest, like, hey, here's a social sharing image and a blurb that you can use on your social channels. It'd kind of be the same for us, for managers and everything.
I think podcasters forget of how valuable their past content is. And if you're the editor, if you're the producer, it's easy. Just go look at your analytics and figure out what your the top 20 podcasts from last year were, or all time, and then create an email list or a sequence that serves those up to the audience. I mean, there's so much value in that. And like you said, creating themes. You could have a month long where we're going to talk about this particular topic, and here's the best of that we've ever talked about. X. It's so good. And I mean, I know podcasters out there. My good friend Lou Mongello, who does WDW Radio, he's got over 500 episodes. And so that's one of the things I've been talking to him about is let's figure out ways to resurface your podcast, because you've got some incredible interviews and content back there. And while he does have some crazy fans that go back from the beginning and listen to all 500 episodes, the average person's not. And so let's get that content resurfaced to them.
Paul, we've been talking a lot about using the email list and the newsletters to promote episodes. But there's got to be a bigger benefit to newsletters and email lists than just, hey, here's my newest episode, or here's one that you might be interested from 2 years ago. You've got to have some experience in there. I'm sure you do. For 25 years.
Okay, so for me, the first benefit is we have a Facebook group, we have a Facebook page, we have community all over the place, and I tell people that community is not your Facebook group, community is not your Facebook page, community is not your Instagram story. Community is where anybody touches your content and engages with your ecosystem. The heart of the community at powells.com is my email. That is the place where I feel I can engage with readers on a more personal level. I know that when I send it out, they're going to actually see it as opposed to a Facebook page. And so I can be very personal, direct. I tell stories. That is the place where I feel like I really get to engage and talk with my audience. Yes, it's a one-to-one kind of talk, but the coolest thing for me is when I get up in the morning and I check my email, and people have replied to yesterday's newsletter, or they've answered a question I asked in email. Because then we're actually having conversations with our readers. I mean, that's what we're doing this for, right? Is to build community and engage people and help them. And as podcasters, we just spew all this information in a microphone, and you don't know with a podcast, are people listening and engaging? With email, they can hit that reply button, and that to me is the biggest thing. Now there's other benefits as well. On powells.com, our main revenue source is advertising and sponsors on our website. So for us, it's building traffic. The email list has become our number 2 traffic source. It's outpaced Google with all the changes and helpful content update and all that other stuff they're doing over there. Our Google traffic has declined, but our email traffic, or traffic from email, is rising.
Excellent.
And so that is now our number 2 source. And I'm doubling down on it. I'm really working even harder this year to build the email list more, because that's going to be a reliable source of traffic for me going forward.
You're saying that your main source of revenue is advertising. Is that within the audio podcast as well as on the website and other platforms that you own?
That's across the board. Advertising, mainly our advertising on the website itself,
Yeah.
but it bleeds over. We have some sponsorships for some other stuff we do. We also we do a lot of live streaming, so we have sponsorships on our live streams and that kind of thing. But the main source is website advertising. And so, yeah, for us, it's driving traffic. That's where we need things to go.
Because the reason I asked is you said something that it's going to sound rude, but I'm going to disagree with. You're saying that the reason we're doing this is community and to grow an audience. I think that's the goal because of the side benefit that we get from that, which is we are doing the show not just for at least people who are paying podcast editors, managers, and producers to work with them aren't doing it because they're trying to just grow a community. They're doing it because they have a platform, they have a service to provide, maybe even a course, some kind of product. That's really the goal, I think, for any podcaster who's going to be working with a service provider like myself, because they've got a course, they've got a book, they've got whatever it is that they're providing, courses and things like that, or they're doing the CPM model like you're doing with the advertising on the website. So that's the product that we're trying to help our clients to generate more revenue from. But the community
product sales,
feeds that.
Yeah, we know that for somebody to buy, right, they got to see it multiple times, but they also have to like, know, and trust us. And to me, that's what email is. That's where I get to engage with people, and they will build that relationship with me. So then when I do offer something for sale, they're going to purchase at a much higher rate.
That know, like, and trust, it keeps coming up in all the conversations I have with a lot of people. And I think there's one more piece to that isn't really talked about. You got the know, which is, obviously they have to know you're out there.
Right.
Nobody's going to really do business with somebody they don't like. I mean, they could, but for the most part, you vote for the person. There's going to be people out there, like there's hundreds of podcast editors out there. Why should they work with me? For some reason, they like me more than they like this other person for some reason. And the trust factor, which is if I'm the podcaster and I'm entrusting this recording to somebody else, obviously I've got to trust them to not destroy it or put it out in a non-favorable way. The last thing, though, is the need. There's got to be a need there as well. So somebody can know, like, and trust you, but if they don't have a need, they're not going to hire you. So that's a little bit of a side track. Yeah. Sorry. But with the newsletters, the things that we're promoting there, it's not just about a show or a guest or an episode, but the overall, what is the brand? What is the product or service that the podcaster is providing? That's what the manager and the service provider like myself needs to be helping them with, because the more that they make, the more they're going to keep you on their team.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where are the places where contractors like us can step in? I mean, we might be talking about the practical steps here, which we're going to go into in another recording, which we're going to do it just for the Podcast Editor Academy. But how does an editor or a manager or producer step into a role to help a podcaster? Do you outsource any of the newsletter stuff to somebody, Paul, or do you do it all yourself?
Talking about my Throwback Thursday sequence, I have a virtual assistant who writes that for me. And so at the beginning of each year, I send him the 52 articles that were the most popular and the ones who have the highest advertising rate from the last year. I send it to him. He writes all of those. And then I go in and just add my personal piece at the top of the email. So yeah, I outsource that. And so that's an easy thing to do. I think as podcast editors and producers, the other thing that they need to be doing is constantly drumming the the call for making sure your host, your podcast person, is using clear call to actions. I see so many podcasters, and we talked about this at Podfest, that their call to action is, please go like and subscribe on Apple. Please go to Spotify and leave me a review. And by the time they're done, it's a litany of 25 different things they want you to do. To me, I think as podcast producers, we need to be telling, getting the person to say, hey, my call to action is go to, like, here's mine when on I use a lot of times in podcasting. Are you looking for powwows near you? We have a calendar of over 1,000 powwows. All you have to do is go to powwows.com/powwows near me. That'll get you on our email list, and I'll send you all the upcoming powwows each week so you don't miss out on any. That's what we as podcast editors and managers need to get our talent to do, is come up with these clear call to actions to get people on the email list and stop kind of spraying all these other actions. Your podcast listeners, if they're loyal to you and they like your show, they're going to do all that other stuff anyways, because podcasters know to go and like and review and all that other stuff. But you get them on the email list, and creating that clear call to action, I think, will really help your podcast host kind of stay focused on that.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve, this reminds me of a discussion you and I were having this morning, and begin with the end in mind, right? So for people that are not just podcast editors, but maybe they're podcast recording engineers or directors, when they jump on the calls to facilitate the recordings with the host, the co-host, the guest, whoever it may be, they can ask the question, what's the point of this episode? What do we want listeners to get out of it? What do we want people to do? Great. After you've told that to me, I will keep that in mind as I'm helping you to record, as I'm helping to facilitate this discussion as a production professional. Because then if I hear you guys or ladies go down the wrong path, I can stop and say, hey, where are we going with this? Or I know if you have a target time, where do you want to end up? Or, hey, the last 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you've gone down a rabbit hole. I think you guys should consider cutting it and going down another path, and that will get you where you want to be. Agree or disagree. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree. Fine. Cut my comments because my voice doesn't get heard on the show. But that's another way to, to help people to get what they want out of the shows. Paul, let me ask you, and this is kind of a variation of what Steve just asked you. So if it sounds repetitive, I apologize. But imagine, you know everything you know about how to get the most value out of your email list, whether it be a newsletter, a welcome sequence, a sales or upsell sequence or launch sequence, what have you. Now imagine that you are the content creator, the personality, the host of the show, and you're working with podcast post-production professionals such as Steve or I. If there are things, or what are the things that could be done to get more value out of your newsletter? I think we've covered and fully explored, and I really like that idea of using the backlog. Are there any other things like that we could do, somewhat easily with the information available to us as post-production professionals to help the podcasters?
Yeah, I think there's a wide array of monetization options that we can kind of leverage. Maybe we can take some of our content and chop it up into some best of episodes and offer those as a premium upgrade or something. I've taken some of my content and packaged it into ebooks and sell that in the newsletter. So I think there's some opportunities there that podcast editors could kind of repackage things and either offer it for a premium as an upsell product, or even just offer it as a take some, like if you're not going to do like the Throwback Thursday kind of thing, then you could take like a recipe blog or somebody like that. Let's chop up all of our holiday episodes and put them into one best of, and then you can offer that up in your newsletter. Okay. I think the editors know the content so well, so I think that's one thing they could do is serve up snippets or best of, all those kind of things with the emails, and I think that's going to add all kinds of value.
I think it's funny that
of course then you can also say you got a best of holiday editions, right? We package it up, we put it in the newsletter. Great, it's going to get more downloads, but then could we package that up and offer it to an advertiser? Hey, you want to sponsor this? We're going to put out our best of holidays. Could we is there some kind of affiliate deal or, other thing that we could go and create for that?
And that would be another service is if you're trying to monetize the newsletter.
Right.
I see David Hooper does a really good job with this. He'll promote stuff within his newsletter. It comes out every Friday about 10 a.m. Eastern or something like that. And he's getting paid to have this stuff in his newsletter. As a service provider, we could be the ones who are setting up and managing that. Because Paul, if you've worked with advertising for quite a while, there's a lot of work involved with setting up the deal, maintaining the deal, doing the makeups if there's something wrong with the deal. Oh man, I mean, have you experienced stuff like that before?
Oh yeah, it's tough. And working with some of the bigger brands, they have a lot of hoops to jump through. I had one that I worked with a couple years ago. The number of reports they required me to fill out at the end of each month, I mean, just took me hours to send them all this data. And I don't know if they ever looked at it because who knows?
Yeah,
but it's crazy.
In my data scientist world, I call that cost of curiosity. Yeah, I remember when
Yes.
executives would ask my team to come up with something. I'm like, what would you do with that information? If I gave you perfect information right now, what would you do? They're like, well, it'd be nice to know. Like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not having my team do that. That is cost of curiosity if you don't even know what you're going to do with that information. But again, that's a rant I'll get onto how, the whole Parkinson's law of corporations, how they create busy work to make it look like they're actually busy, vice value. Unlike this episode is just as long as it needs to be because we are trying to provide as much value as possible in that time frame, and then we're not going to stretch it out or make it any busier than it needs to be.
Even though I might have had one more question?
Oh, go for it. Yeah, if it adds value, let's add it. Yeah.
I think it will. So, Paul, how many different lists do you have?
Oh, that's a great question. So, broad topic, I have my paulgowder.com. That is my coaching consulting. I have that list, and then I have powells.com. Now, inside of powells.com, email sequences, I have, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 that are active right now. But then also inside of that, I have, in the last few months, we've been, again, I'm trying to figure out more ways to use the newsletter and to drive traffic. So we've niched down. So we have a travel-specific newsletter that comes out in the powells.com, kind of a subset. We have one that is for crafters and people who are doing like beadwork and that kind of thing. And then we have a third one that is our Native American Book Club. So those are three like subcategories inside of powells.com. So it's a lot.
Sounds like a lot to manage. Sounds like you could use some help. And this is where, the service providers
Yes.
step in. And the last question I want to ask is a part of that. Do you ever go through and cull those lists of the dead people, the unsubscribers? Is that a task that you do on a regular basis? Is it automated? How long does that take?
So it was something I was doing manually each quarter and pruning the list. And I was doing it pretty aggressively. So with 100,000 subscribers, sometimes I was culling 20,000 at a time. I have my list on, and that when I say that, that's exactly the reaction people have is, oh my God, you just got rid of 20,000 subscribers. But I'll talk about why in a second. But recently I've worked with Kit, and we've come up with a kind of an automated way to do a better job of getting that to happen more organically and on an automated thing, so I don't have to worry about it. And we give people several different chances to re-engage, so it's not as cold and harsh as a cut that I used to do. But for me, with 100,000 email list, the bill's high. So get the subscribers off that aren't opening your email, but also deliverability. As you send out emails, if Gmail or Google is seeing that you're sending 10,000 emails that never get opened, they're going to start questioning whether or not you need to be in the promotions tab. So yeah, cull the list, cull it often, whether you're on Beehive or Flowdesk or Kit, whatever. There are some automated ways, and there's some, in Kit it's called visual automations you can create to kind of do that on an automated basis and kind of just, you don't have to worry about it then.
Yep. You just hammered home what I was trying to say is it's a lot of work. And it's nice to outsource some of that stuff. So if you've got a client who's getting overwhelmed, there's a lot of benefits to having an email list, a lot of benefits to running a newsletter, and a lot of help required to maintain that efficiently and get the most out of it.
And if I may, Steve, I know you're very much a, hey, let me raise my hand client and do this for you. This is something that needs to be done, and I would like to offer this service for you. For those that know me, maybe longtime listeners of the show, I get paid more by doing less. So I'm the type of person that gives those assets to the marketing team. Like, hey, you can make the most out of your email list by doing this episodic stuff or whatever. Here are the pieces that I can do. I can, do like 20% of the work and get 80% of the effort out of it, the whole Pareto rule, and then throw it over the fence of the marketing team. And they say, oh, this is great. I will connect the last little piece that we have, make the most of it. Hey, podcast editor, manager, producer, you are the most valuable person to our team. When budget reviews come up, we're going to make sure not to cut you. So
Yep.
I like doing less by helping them out and say, hey, this was easy for me to put together based off what I've had, but team, you're make them sound like the smart people in the room. You're the smart people. You can make the most of it, and certainly they can.
All right, so let's practice what we preach, Paul. Our audience is podcast editors, producers, managers, directors. If you've got a newsletter or an email list you need them to join, here's your time. Give me your CTA.
Yeah, so I put together a video that talks about how to get your listeners over to your email list. It's at paulgowder.com/podcast. So paulgowder.com/podcast. That'll get you to the video where I talk about it. It's basically the same presentation I gave at PodFest, where I'd show you how I have grown my email list to over 100,000 and using some techniques that really convert your whether you're a live streamer or a podcaster, it will convert those people over to your email list.
And that's again at
paulgowder.com/podcast.
Yes. Paul, thanks for coming on the Podcast Editors Mastermind Show.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.